Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much once again joining me for tea time today. We have a little bit of fireside. That smokiness of the lap song, so good. I hope you're joining me with your cup of tea, maybe a cup of coffee, or as I always say, maybe some rum. Something a little bit harder. Depends on what part of the planet you're on. So today we're going to be talking about the Canon EOS R3. It was officially announced today, September 14th. There was a big announcement, and I want to discuss with you guys how right were the rumors, number one. And number two, we want to do a comparison between the Sony A9 II compared to this Canon EOS R3. And I think it's a good comparison, and I'll tell you why in just a second. But before I get into it, I want to say that if you haven't downloaded any of my ebooks as of yet, go check them out over at JCristina.com/books. Once again, JCristina.com/books. And I always say, if you get anything out of these videos, please give them a thumbs up. That helps the YouTube algorithm greatly. Please do so. So let's get right into the actual specs, how they were at release as of today. So the Canon EOS R3 has a 24.1 megapixels BSI, has a backside illuminated sensor, a variable angled touchscreen. Basically, it's a fully articulating back panel. That is awesome. All right, we don't see that on pro cameras ever. This would probably be the first fully articulating back panel. That's great if you're doing video and you want to be able to see yourself, right? Also, or if the talent wants to see themselves. Also, it does have that shoe, that accessory shoe at the top. Now, that accessory shoe is going to be able to take like microphones. Maybe they'll do some type of XLR device that they can attach to the top, but it'll also be able to have a smartphone adapter used on it. But we're going to wait for that to come probably next year, maybe March, I believe. It's going to be a little bit down the road. Now, the Canon EOS R3 does shoot 30 frames per second burst, and that is an electronic shutter mode with absolutely no distortion. So if you're taking a picture of, let's say, someone swinging the club at a ball, a golfer, for example, you're not going to get that bending of the club that you would on a lot of other cameras. And the reason for that is an extremely fast refresh rate. Also, this camera will provide you with 8 stops of IS, or image stabilization. That is unbelievable. That is the most. Now remember, that is when you combine the body with a lens that also has IS built into it. You end up with a maximum of 8 stops of image stabilization, which is nice. The camera will be able to autofocus down to -7 EV, which is really quite dark, guys. Very dark. Also, the camera does have dual card slots, which we figured it would, being that it's a professional grade camera, but instead of having 2 UHS 2 card slots, it has a UHS 2 as well as a CF card slot. Now the camera does provide oversampled 4K with Canon Log 3 as well as internal RAW recording, which is really quite nice. Also, it now does automobile tracking. So you have your animal tracking, your face tracking, your eye tracking, and all the rest of the tracking, UFO tracking. But it also does now automobile tracking, as well as like helmet tracking and whatnot. That's going to be really fantastic for sports action wildlife guys. Really, really fantastic. Now the camera also will allow you to shoot in electronic shutter mode using a speed light now that it's attached to that new accessory shoe. I'm going to guess that accessory hot shoe that's at the top of the camera is not only a hot shoe for providing the flash, but also more data, and it's probably a high-speed data connection. Now, the weather sealing is going to be exactly identical to an EOS 1D, just like we have the 1DX Mark III, which is nice. And speaking about the 1DX Mark III, this unit, the R3, uses the exact same battery. That is an LPE19, those big, massive batteries, which is nice. And the price is going to be $5,999. Let's call it $6,000, and you can pre-order it right now over on B&H. Now, I was reading an article over at the photography blog that I thought was interesting, and they did a direct comparison between this Canon EOS R3 and the Sony A9 II. And some people will be like, why would you compare those cameras, right? You're looking at a camera that's 2 years old compared to a brand new camera. I understand that, but I think that it is a good comparison because, in my personal opinion, they both have a 24 megapixel backside illuminated CMOS sensor in it, number one. And number two, the Sony Alpha 1, the brand new camera, I think is more of a unit that should be compared to the up-and-coming EOS R1 when that comes out, all right? Because they're going to be right around the same price, in my personal opinion. All right, so let's take a look at a few of the comparisons between the EOS R3 and the Sony A9 Mark II. Now, the EOS R3 does shoot 6K 60p internal oversampled 4K at 120p, where the Sony A9 Mark II puts out 4K at 30p and only 1080 at the 120p. So we're getting, you can see a big difference when it comes to video. Now, the Canon does provide unlimited recording. This is what they say, unlimited. You can record for as long as you want, 6 hours, or until your Canon EOS R3 turns into a ball of molten lava. Whichever one comes first. Just joking, obviously, hopefully that is not the case like the R5, which was a major problem. I think Canon has learned from their mistakes. I don't know, we will see. Fingers crossed. Now, the Canon EOS R3 also provides 4,779 points of dual pixel autofocus, where the Sony A9 Mark II only provides 693 points of autofocus. They are phase detection. Now, one of the things that really sets the Canon apart from the Sony is that it has the photographer eye tracking, where you put your eye up to the EVF, and now, instead of just you looking out the EVF is looking at you and deciding what you're looking at, so that through its artificial, let's say, deep learning, it can find out what is your priority in the scene, and then it can lock onto that and stick to that until you change it. That is quite interesting, and we don't know how good it's going to be because it is a brand new feature, but it's kind of an old feature too that Canon just brought back from many years ago, but that's a whole nother story. We won't get into that right now. Now, the R3, using its electronic shutter, can burst all the way up to 30 frames per second and capture 540 JPEGs continuously before having to offload them, whereas the Sony A9 Mark II with the electronic shutter will be able to do 20 frames per second and capture 361 JPEGs before offloading. Now, the Canon and the Sony have extremely good weather sealing, professional grade weather sealing, whereas the Canon does have weather sealing that's identical that you would see in a 1DX Mark III. So if you know that camera, you know what type of weather sealing you're getting. The difference between the two is once you take the Sony and throw on a grip, now all of a sudden you do have a point where moisture could enter if that was to loosen up. Whereas with the Canon, it is a single integrated battery body. All right, so it's a little bit different there. I would probably give it to the Canon on that side. Now, like I said earlier, the Canon EOS R3 does provide 8 stops of in-body image stabilization, or IBIS, whereas the Sony A9 Mark II only provides 5-axis, but 5.5 stops, and that is it. 5.5 stops is basically the standard that you would see in the business, so to speak, for these cameras. Whereas we're seeing Canon all the way up to 8 stops, but that's because they're marrying the in-body image stabilization with the IS, or image stabilization, in the lens itself. Remember, you have to use a lens that has IS built in to be able to get your 8 stops. Now, as far as the EVF, or electronic viewfinder, the Canon R3 does have an EVF with 5.76 million dots of resolution, whereas the Sony A9 Mark II's EVF has only 3.69 million dots of resolution. So a couple million dots here, a couple million dots there, it is a difference. So I'm going to guess the Canon's EVF is going to look a little bit better. Now, the same thing holds true with the back panel. The Canon EOS R3 has a fully articulating back panel, number one, but it also has 4.1 million dots of resolution, whereas the Sony only has a single movement or a single tilt up or down back panel, but it only has 1.44 million dots of resolution. That is a big difference. 4 million dots to 1.4. That is a major difference. But For me, the real big thing is that the fully articulated back panel on a Canon is going to be much more sought after for me in comparison to a single tilty tilt. They're both 3 inches in size. Now, battery life. Some people care, some people don't. I personally care because I want to know how many of these little chiclets I need to carry around with me. Now, the CIPA, let's say rated battery life for the R3 is up to 860 shots. And that's if you have your EVF off, which you would never do. But it is 860 shots, whereas the Sony A9 II, their CIPA rating is up to 690 shots, once again with the EVF off. So a couple of hundred shots different. Now, it makes sense because the Sony battery is this big, whereas the Canon battery is like this big. It's a big difference. And finally, the Canon EOS R3 does provide dual card slots just like the Sony does, but it gives you a UHS 2 slot as well as a CF Express, whereas with the Sony, you're only getting the UHS 2 slots. I do like 2 similar slots, but I understand what Canon is doing here by only putting 1 CF Express. So if you want to use that, you can. If you want to use an older card, you can. I would like to see 2 CF Express card slots going forward in the Canon EOS R1, but we'll see what happens. For me, if you want to get an EOS R1, the top of the top of the top, you're going to have to spend extra money on a card. And that's just simply the way it is. CF Express are very, very expensive right now. And I think going forward, they're going to continue to be expensive. Now, bear in mind, the Sony A9 II is a 2-year-old camera. So we're kind of comparing apples to oranges here just a bit. I would expect Canon to be better. All right, it is 2 years newer. But remember, guys, the Canon is $6,000, where the Sony is $1,500 less, at about $4,500. So I would venture to say many photographers out there would find a better or a greater value in purchasing a Sony A9 II in comparison to this Canon R3. Now, I'm a Canon shooter, but for me, the way I look at this is always value. These days, value is everything. People are looking at bottom line and what they're getting, the ROI, the return on investment. And if you are a photographer, a new photographer with no skin in the game, when I say no skin in the game, skin meaning lenses. You don't have a, let's say, a shelf full of Sony glass, or you don't have a shelf full of Canon glass and you're brand new. I think $1,500 is a big, big chunk of money that you can spend on a couple of lenses, or maybe one really good lens. So I would venture to say, like I said, some people are going to really look at the Sony A9 II as being a better buy than the Canon EOS R3. Even though the R3 has a lot of class-leading features in it, like photographer eye tracking, where you put your eye up to the EVF, that's brand new tech. Is it going to work? Is it going to be something that photographers use, or are they going to just feel that it's kind of hokey and just turn it off? I don't know. What is going to be the actual true length of video shooting 4K? Is it going to melt like the R5, or is the bigger body going to provide enough, in quotes, enough heat dissipation, all right, to be able to record unlimited, as they said that you will be able to do? Is that the case, or is it not? There's a lot of testing, and you're going to find a lot of videos now coming up on YouTube. Watch them all before you put your money, let's say, on the line. Once again, you can pick this camera up, or you can pre-order it over at B&H. Maybe I'll put a link down below in the comments or down in the description, either way. But anyways, I want to know what you think. What do you think? Are either one of these cameras something that you would be interested in, or are they both just simply too expensive? And if they're not too expensive and you do not have skin in the game, which way would you go? Would you go Canon or would you go Sony? I want to hear from you. So if you enjoyed this content even a little bit, throw it a thumbs up. That will be very, very helpful. Also subscribe to the channel and click this little bell icon over here so when I go live or when a new video comes out, you will be notified of it immediately. And if you want to help the channel, you can use this PayPal link here, or you can click down here where it says join. You become a member. I'll be able to give you perks for doing so. You provide the channel $1 or $2, whatever you so desire. Also, YouTube has given us this button down here that says thanks. It has a little $sign. If you click on that, you could give the channel $1 or $2, and supposedly the lion's share of that, the majority, goes to the creative like myself. That would be awesome. don't know if it works yet, but we'll see. And finally, head over to my website, JCristina.com, where you can find all the photography tools I've invented for you and me over the years, and hopefully there's something there that you might like. And if there is, please pick it up and support me and my family. That's it, guys. I'm out of here for yet another vlog. Many blessings to you and your family. Stay safe and stay healthy.